Chris, how are you, bud?
I am well. You see that big map back there?
Yeah, I did actually. Yeah.
I mark every airport I go to.
Oh, is that what you do? That's awesome.
Yeah. It's kind of nice.
That's really cool.
Yeah, not as cool as your view. That's a real live view. It's not even a background.
Well, did you get your dogs walked prior to
Yes,
the
sir.
rain starting? That's good. Hey, Ryan. John, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. I like you got a different background tonight. I like it.
I got hundreds of those. And Gabe, congratulations on your designation for the FAA safety team.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you for all the guidance and encouragement there. So thank you as well. I'm excited for it. I think it'll be a lot of fun. So let's see, we have Greg Ashby online with us tonight. We have, hey, Mike, how are you?
You're muted.
Hey, good evening. How are y'all doing this evening?
Doing good, doing well.
You'd think I would have this Zoom and Adobe Connect thing figured out because that's what I've been doing all week, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah?
I started at 7 in the morning on Adobe Connect, and at 5:30 I got done with the last one.
Gee.
Zoom's in the middle.
I've not used Adobe Connect yet, so I don't know that one. I don't think. Hey, Ray, how are you, buddy?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Doing great. Doing great. Let's see. Oh, we got Ray DeHaan with us tonight, too. Hey, Ray.
In the car?
In the car. There's Greg. Greg, you're joining us on Zoom tonight versus Instagram Live. I like it.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing okay. Hey, John.
Hey, Greg.
I like the picture in the background there.
Looks familiar.
Yeah. I haven't seen it for a while, but yeah.
Where are you, by the way?
Oh,
Salt
that's
Lake?
an interesting. No, I did that on Saturday. I'm in Minneapolis right now. All my flights today in Detroit canceled, so they deadheaded me to Minneapolis, and then my flights today canceled, so I have one leg to Rhinelander and then deadhead back, and who knows from there. It's just, it changes by the hour.
Unbelievable.
Man.
So I'm hoping to be home tomorrow night. We'll see.
Good.
It's not going to be very effective instruction on my part for today, but tomorrow, because I have an initial candidate who is, we're doing one leg, and that's it. And he's supposed to be doing IOE. So we'll see.
Be nice to him.
I have mellowed in my old age, John. I did sign off my very first captain yesterday, so that was fun.
That's great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's this has been a fun journey.
I've really enjoyed watching your journey, Greg. It's been awesome. I mean, I remember what you were doing years ago at Leesburg, and it's just been really cool to watch your story. So it's awesome.
Thank you very much. I keep a lower profile here lately than just, I don't know. And that's hard to keep up with stuff too, but I follow Smokehouse Live a lot. So
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us here. And I know we got some first timers here. So whenever anybody joins, just so that you know, we always give us, 5-10 minutes here to let people kind of meander in here. We have about 17 or so here on Zoom, but when you do join, you will be on automatic mute. So when you want to talk, just unmute yourself. We found out that it was rather noisy when I didn't set that feature up at the beginning. So hopefully it's a little less hectic like this.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then the other thing, as far as housekeeping, I have some notes here, but as far as housekeeping, as we start having a conversation and going through things, sometimes it's a little hard to kind of get into the conversation. So if you either are on Facebook Live or on Zoom, you can just go ahead and raise your hand, and that'll be a note to just call on you so we can get everybody's questions in. And then the other thing that we have set up still, it's the same poll that we had the last time, but as we move forward and things like that, we'll go ahead and we'll have different polls, but for now I kept it the same. It's nice to know who the CFIs and DPEs are speaking with. So if you want to go ahead and complete that poll that we just launched, it'd be helpful. And then I share the results as we go.
Gabe, the poll hasn't shown up yet.
Hasn't? Let me try that one more time. Relaunch. How about now?
It showed up.
And I know the last time, I think I had a few, I don't think I had seaplane in there as far as a rating. And keep in mind, this is the second go around on a poll. So again, we'll continue to develop that, but I think it's kind of cool to be able to know who everyone's talking with. Hey, Ryan, by the way, I like your background tonight, buddy. It's nice.
Hey, thanks.
Looking
I
good.
see your weather's about the same as mine.
Yeah, it's it started raining here about an hour ago.
Yeah, we got maybe 5 miles, but about 1,000 feet.
Hey, Nate, nice to see you, brother.
I'm still figuring this thing out. Sorry, dude. Good to see you.
No, you too. Randy as well. We got Addison. Got all kinds of new people on here tonight. Hey, Randy. Hey.
Yeah, good to be here. Good to see y'all.
Peter,
just
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just saying, Peter, your camera is pointed to the ceiling or something, so we can't. Oh, there you go. There you are. What you doing? Oh, you're on mute, Peter.
Yep. Let me see if I can unmute him here.
Yeah.
Oh, he's probably got it.
No, it's on mute.
There you go.
Oh, there you go. Now you can talk.
Pretty well.
Good.
Great.
Hey, Johnny, how are you?
Pretty good. Thanks for hosting this.
Yeah, of course. Got Gary Shiflett in the house too, and Bob Garrity as well. So, Bob, I see you got your cameras still working. That's great.
Hey, Bob, you're on mute. We can't hear you. Hey, there you go.
Oh, let me,
I got you.
You're fine. You're fine.
I got you. If you guys don't mind, let's just give us a few more minutes here, and people are still kind of popping in, and then we'll just go ahead and get started. But Ray, thanks for throwing up those suggestions on the poll the other night. Where are you, Ray?
You're next to you on my screen.
Oh, there you are. Those were great suggestions and a great idea to throw up the poll. So, and thank you for the reminder to pin that to the top. This was the most vote on, obviously, option. So here we are with special airspace. So thanks for that.
Yeah, they just kind of started coming to me, and it's neat to see this one take off like it did. So cool.
Cool. Hey, Ahmed, how are you?
how you doing, Gabe?
Doing good.
All right.
Cool.
Hey, Gabe, by the way, I like the hat.
Hey, thanks, buddy. Just add it to the collection. This is the first non-white hat I've had in a while.
Looks good.
Thank you. Mike Schwartz already has his hand raised. So what's going on, Mike?
I just figured I'd ask a little impromptu poll myself and ask who saw the Starlink satellites fly over last night.
It's like Johnny did.
It was pretty interesting seeing about 60 of those things go from the northwest to the southeast. I'm going to post a link to a website that'll tell you when things like that fly over, satellites, the ISS. And it's actually kind of neat being able to go outside and see those things now for a while when we're not under overcast.
I wish I would have missed. Yeah, saw that. I didn't. What was it? 2 nights ago. It was super clear. 2 or 3 nights ago. Yeah. So hey, Gary. So before we get started too, I saw you were able to speak with was it Clay as well this morning? You speak with Clay this morning?
No, I wasn't at work this morning. He spoke to the day crew.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's pretty cool though that he was able to fly around Dulles in the Super Decathlon doing some pattern work. All right, cool. Yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. Thank you for everyone for being here and for the CFIs and DPEs. John, thank you for, I think this is what, your second or third one joining us. So thank you for being here. Mike as well. I don't see Mark yet, but he said I think he might be joining later. And any other, Bob, Greg, anybody that wants to join in here as far as Peter having questions, please do so when you have a question that you think you can answer. And it's been more of an open conversation with everybody. So if everyone's good with that sort of style, I feel like we should keep that going. Again, for those that are just joining, you're on mute automatically when you join. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you want to speak, and use the raise hand feature if you have something to get in. I have the poll up. I'm going to leave it up for another few minutes for those that join. Go ahead and complete that, and then I'll share the results so that everybody knows what's going on as far as who's in the room. So with that said, why don't we go ahead and dive in? We kept this one, or we're going to try to keep this session to a special airspace topics, whether it's the SFRA or Hudson Corridor, and questions around that. So does anyone, before we get started, have any thoughts or anything they want to throw out there, or a suggestion or a question to get us started off? Chris, you got anything for us? Okay.
A quick way to unmute is just to hit your space bar while you're talking.
Krish, unmute.
You got to make.
Sorry about that. No,
Your
it's just.
cursor's also by the screen to unmute to use the space bar.
Yeah, got it. I was just sending a link out to someone. Sorry about that. All right, so that is done. Yeah, Vic Datta just reshared. He wanted the link for the Zoom meeting, so I was just sending that out to him.
Yeah, and I'm going to mention something real quick because we are on Facebook as well. So if anybody, I have got a few messages on that. If you're having trouble finding the link, if somebody asks you, it's in the invite for the Facebook link, so you can find it there easily. All right, cool. Well, does anyone want to get us started off on a question for a CFI or a DPE around special airspace? There's Vic right there. So.
Right, great. So I'll get you guys started because there's one question I've been thinking about for a while. Now, out west, obviously, there's a lot more variation in terms of the class golf airspace and where it begins and where it ends, and the altitudes. And so overall, I guess it goes up to 14,500. But if the elevation is high, it can go 1,500 more and on all that stuff. On the East Coast, based on either your flying experience, the places you've been. Are there places like that on the East Coast where the airspace is irregular, for lack of a better term, that you guys have been at? Because most of the airspace, I guess, in our area, we talk about the Sephora a lot. We talk about some of the tercels further up north. But I was just wondering, on the East Coast, are there any special areas we need to be aware of as we're flying around?
Well, I guess I'll start off with an answer for you, Krish. When we talk about airspace, and I'm going to speak very generically now. I'm not going to say anything that's an absolute, because I'm not going to get pinned down by Tim Fisher for saying something that can be challenged. But for the most part, I would make the statements, anything east of the Mississippi River is going to be controlled airspace, Class E airspace. The question will become whether it becomes Class C at the surface 700 feet or 1,500
Sure.
feet. By and large, there's very little uncontrolled class Gulf airspace east of the Mississippi River.
Okay.
As far as special airspaces and things of that nature,
Mm-hmm.
we got a ton of them. We've got special flight rules areas. We've got prohibited areas. We've got restricted areas. We've got military operations areas, military training routes, and any number of other things out there that can certainly make it challenging to navigate this airspace.
And one factor on where the controlled airspace is or it's uncontrolled is radar coverage. Out west, a lot of wide open spaces, radar coverage is not available. East Coast, as Mike says, east of the Mississippi, got radar pretty much everywhere.
So, John, what you're saying is if there is radar coverage, chances are that it will be controlled.
There's opportunity for it to be controlled.
Okay. That makes sense.
I have a question.
Yeah, Ahmed.
My question is, for some Class Bravo airspace, there is a VFR corridor. When I went to San Diego and I flew with a CFI, we flew VFR over San Diego Airport. So how do you find these? And where do you find them?
Do you know if there is one in the Washington, D.C. area?
I guess not.
Oh, yes, there is. It is a really cool thing to do.
Oh.
So we have VFR corridors around and in the Beast airspace here. It's on the flip side of the terminal area chart, the TAC chart.
Okay.
And it will depict the flyways, as they're called, and the altitudes and directions of flight.
Okay, I see.
I haven't seen the one in San Diego, but if you haven't done the VFR corridor through Washington, you should do that. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, yeah, we'll look for that. Thank you. But the VFR in San Diego corridor was really amazing because we flew over San Diego and over San Diego International Airport. So that was amazing for me. Thank you.
I'm not sure about VFR, but I know if you follow IFR and you're going east, you can get right over top BWI a good amount.
Yep.
I've found many times, and Gary can provide some clarity on this, that ATC tends to prefer putting us about 5,000 or 6,000 feet right over the top of a Bravo airport because we're out of the way there.
When you're headed eastbound, Victor 214 over Baltimore is the pref route below 10,000 feet and for single engine props.
Yeah, New York Center is notorious, I should say, for giving you 5,500 feet right over JFK if you're heading up to the Northeast. You get that all the time.
Been there, done that.
Nice. So we got a question here in the chat from Andrew. The question is, JYO being now towered, is there any news or talk of JYO obtaining its own airspace or shelf underneath Dulles' Class B? And that's for Andrew, a question from Andrew.
I guess I'll take that one. So right now, because they're in a test phase and they're not certified, they can't have airspace. We unofficially, 4 miles from the airport, if you're proceeding within 4 miles of the airport below 2,000 feet, you're going to talk to tower. Technically, we're still responsible for IFR separation because they don't own the airspace, but it's kind of been a hot topic for us because Leesburg Towers, there's been a few instances where they've done something and it has affected our separation. I certainly hope they get their own airspace once they're certified. And then they'll be able to do things like opposite direction and some other options that towers have inside their airspace.
Yeah, I've heard, I responded to Andrew in the chat, but I've heard, hopefully once they're all fully certified, potential is for Class D designation. Also, we've been talking about tower, probably changing the CTAP frequency to match the tower frequency like most other towered airports, which would really help with safety right around the time the tower switches, either from when it turns on or turns off. And then that will also update the charts and all that kind of stuff. But until then, like if you look at, the AFD, or if you look at the charts or anything like that right now, it doesn't really show. It's only in a NOTAM and posted in the, on the AWAS and things like that. So hopefully then once it's fully certified, we'd be able to get some of that stuff.
So this is I'm just going to ask a question. This is rather, directed towards Leesburg, but for Mark or Mike or John, what's the pilot deviations or having, squawking the wrong code or breaking airspace? What's the status and how's things going around Leesburg for that right now in general?
Mike, you want me to start it?
Yeah, I was going to let you or Ray take it to start with.
Well, deviations are still occurring, unfortunately. I don't have the stats in front of me, but we're still getting 1,200 codes from time to time, not as much. But we're still getting predominantly people clipping the Leesburg maneuvering area and the SFR around it on a 1226 code. They're not watching their navigation. Situational awareness is probably not what it's supposed to be, and they're clipping the Sephora, and that's where most of them are coming from. And that really shouldn't happen. Over the years, we've tried to emphasize through our seminars and other means, if you're leaving Leesburg, go west, and then once you're clear of the B shelves, then you can go on your way. But if you try to shortcut it, either coming into Leesburg or departing Leesburg, then that's where we see the formal pilot deviations show up on the reports that go over to the FSDO, and then action is required to help resolve those. So we would like to see those reduced, but I fear some of it may be from either transients coming in or perhaps student pilots, but they still occur.
John, I think the last time the FAA gave us any information on it, most of the people clipping it are clipping the northwest corner over the Potomac River, Point of Rocks area. Not nearly as many are clipping going to the west and south.
Correct.
But unfortunately, and I'm going to ask Perry about this, they really don't provide us a lot of statistical information about this. And the reason's been given, well, once we start the violation process and then we have privacy issues we have to deal with. I think we asked them one time in one of our meetings that, well, just give us the raw numbers, and if you can, whether it's local people or people coming in. I think the consensus was probably about 80% of them are people that are returning to Leesburg or coming to Leesburg, and they're not locals. So they're not as familiar with the airspace as the local pilots are and the local schools are. Actually, probably the bigger problem we have for the locals is violating the Class B airspace, bumping through the floors that we have around here. So before we have another meeting for long, I will send Perry a direct email, ask him if he can start providing John, myself, and possibly the flight schools a little better statistical information on this so we can try to deal with the problem if it's truly our problem. If it's people coming over from Frederick, Maryland, or over in that direction, they're just coming to Leesburg either to bring the plane for maintenance or what have you, that's going to be a tougher problem to fight. But the local guys, I think we can do a decent job affecting that population.
Yep.
Mike, what do you think?
Well,
Am I on track?
We had a student pilot who had quite the penetration of the inner Bravo ring. He got a little bit confused when he was coming inbound. And one of the good things going on is the FAA has a compliance program which they've instituted. It's about a year and a half old now. And basically, if a person is willing to admit their fault, accept training and counseling to prevent it from happening going forward, it becomes nothing more than a slap on the wrist, a wag of a finger, and the pilot's allowed to continue flying and going on without a suspension or anything like that. That's good to help with a lot of the honest mistakes that pilots made. Let not you think that means that you're not going to get a potential violation if you cause an aircraft leaving Dulles to have to take evasive action to avoid you. That would be, something a little bit different, but an honest mistake, they're being more forgiving and more willing to look at training and counseling to correct the problem. Along with that, one of the things that's going on that we need to be aware of as local pilots at Leesburg is a lot of our tower controllers have been known to tell people to extend their downwind for spacing. And if you're not well aware of your position, we're only 2 miles from that inner ring and it's real easy to clip that. So I tell them if they tell me to extend, I'm going to make a right 360 and I'll rejoin the downwind. I'm not going to go past the power plant. It's just getting a little too close for my comfort. Over.
I start getting nervous when they get really close to the toll road down through there.
Hey, Mike, Andrew had a follow-up in the chat for you. I don't know if you saw that or not, but. You're on mute, Mike.
Hey, Mike, you're on mute. It looks pretty funny to watch you talk while you're on mute, by the way. You emote a lot.
It's okay. My lips are moving and no words are coming out. Yeah, I know.
I read your lips. I thought it was genius.
We're going to send you back for
Thank
more
you, Tim. I'm glad you liked it.
We're going to send you for more retraining, Mike.
Hey, I've been doing this since 7 o'clock this morning. I think I'm getting tired. Now, Andrew, the simple answer is yes, this is a separate program. The compliance program, if you will, is a tool that FAA inspectors have now in their toolbox when addressing or dealing with an airman deviation from a rule or regulation, if you will. It's for dealing with the honest mistakes that happen. It does fall under the enforcement category of violations and pilot deviations, if you will. It's designed to make the FAA more accommodating for the honest mistakes. We get the data we learn at the FAA about the mistakes, where the pinch points are in the national airspace system, and we can work on them by working with the pilot community and the maintenance community as well. The NASA form, on the other hand, I like to think of it, if you will, as a get out of jail free card. There's no limit to the number of times you can fill it out and use it. However, when you make a mistake and you fill out the form, 99 and 9/10 of the time, you're never going to hear from the FAA. Nothing's going to happen. But that information on the NASA form goes into a huge database, and the FAA calls it and looks at it, and they can identify pinch points in the system, things that need improvement, areas and processes that aren't working, and we can learn. If the pilot has made a regulatory violation, you bust the Bravo airspace, and you cause an airplane to make a evasive maneuver to avoid a midair collision, that would be a regulatory violation of airspace. The FAA could get you for that. They can get you for careless or reckless. And I'm sure that they can throw in some of the 71s and other regulations when it comes to airspace operations as well. But while the pilot would get a violation on their record, they would not get the sanction for admitting what happened and what went wrong. You can only use a NASA form one time in 5 years as a get out of jail free card to get out of the sanction, but you can fill out one every time you fly. We love the data. We want to see it. We want to learn. Mark, I see you nodding your head. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I've used the NASA form several times. I've never actually gotten a call from the FAA over any of the instances that that I used them for. I can't remember all of them. However, I will tell you from firsthand experience how the kinder, gentler FAA works with this new compliance program, because I've been through it. Was flying a jet coming up out of Florida. The autopilot overshot the altitude by 100 feet in RVSM airspace. So we got 200 feet above our assigned altitude. And unfortunately, it was as much my fault. I was the PIC, but I also had a co-pilot. It was a beautiful, clear night, and he was just amazed at all the beautiful airplanes out there. In fact, I think some of the words to his fact was, "Man, I can't believe how many airplanes are out there." Well, the one we should have been paying attention to was 1,000 feet above us and 4.8 miles away. So there was an inadvertent loss of separation. And I got the call. I have a number for you to take down and call when you get on the ground. So I called, talked to the guy, some guy down in Florida, told him I'd filed a NASA report. Okay, you'll be hearing from us. I got a call from another guy in Florida who was a retired FAA SI. They contracted a lot of this kinder and gentler FAA stuff out to these guys, and they make a decision. And in this case, the guy called me. We talked about it. He said, well, absolutely, there was nothing willful or malicious about that. And he said, I need you to do a couple things for me, because if you do this, there will be no letter in your record. There'll be no file of this incident in your record, only that you did some recurrent training. And I said, yes, sir, absolutely. What do you want me to do? He said, you'll be getting a couple emails. I got a couple emails. They assigned 3 different courses in the Wings program for me to do. I submitted the certificates back, and that was the end of it. And if you check my record, there's absolutely no mention anywhere in my pilot record that this incident ever occurred. So it does work, but the big key to this is that it wasn't a willful violation, that you acknowledge the violation or whatever it happens to be, and that you're willing to participate in their kinder and gentler FAA remediation program. And if you do that, you'll probably have a very good outcome. And you should do that regardless of what program you're involved in. The guy I talked with never mentioned the FAA form. He said, yeah, I see in the notes here you did it. That's not a factor for this. So I think maybe he wanted to save the NASA form for something more serious down the road. I don't know if he felt I had the potential for that or not, but it all worked out very well. So, you know, I will tell you, we're all subject to making mistakes for every now and then. In this particular case, my fault. The autopilot didn't catch it. I didn't catch it until we were 200 feet above our assigned altitude, and in RVSM, that's a no-no.
This is John. I'll also mention that in recent years, the FAA has asked some of us examiners to examiners/fast team representatives to help the inspectors go through the vetting process if there is a pilot deviation. I've done a couple of them, talked to the instructors, talked to the student, the pilot, and we resolve it on a very friendly basis. We might have a final meeting with an ASI, and as long as it's not willful and you're cooperative, that usually works out very nicely.
Yeah, yeah. And you're going to find that as these things come along, the FAA, what we used to call 609, and then it became the 709 ride, you're going to find examiners becoming more involved in that as the FAA gets a little further removed from the cockpit. So you'll see John and I getting more involved in those types of remediation activities, even the types of activities where there's actually a violation of the FAR involved. In the past, it's always been safety types of things. You know, hey, we got a guy that's buzzing the airport, he needs talked to. Okay, we'll get somebody to do that for you. We're going to be more involved in recertification of pilots as we go down the road.
Hey, Mark, there was a question in the chat that is asking, how and where can you check your pilot record, as you mentioned?
Call a FSDO inspector and ask them to check it for you.
It's not publicly available.
Yeah, you can go online and see what your registration, what the Airman's Registry has for you in terms of your pilot certificates and such. But you as far as any of the enforcement action and stuff like that, the only way you can do that is to call the FSDO and talk to an ASI. And if you're at that point, you probably have his number.
Now, is this information available to the insurance company?
If they want it. But here's the thing. Don't lie on an insurance form. They ask you that question. Every insurance form I've ever filled out asks the question, have you ever been involved in an FAA violation? In my case, I can truthfully answer that no, because it was remediated without going to the violation. They never started an enforcement action report against me. So therefore, there's no record. But if you have an EAR started against you, no matter how it resolves, you better answer yes to that question. They always ask you, have you ever been involved in an accident or an incident with an aircraft? If you have, you better answer yes to that question. Case in point, the Navajo I fly. Went out to Colorado, but way back in 2000 to have some work done on it. On one of the maintenance test flights, the folks landed a gear up. The insurance company said, you know, these things happen. We understand. We're just collecting all our documents and records so we can close the file on this. And they went to the guy that was flying it and said, when you filled out this insurance form, you said you had an instrument proficiency check in Navajos in the last 12 months. Send us a copy of that logbook page. Long story short, he didn't have it. He had one for 421, but not for Navajo. And the insurance company said, well, but you said you did have one for the Navajo. And he said, well, you know, I thought I did, or whatever his excuse was. The insurance company said, well, okay. They paid the claim to the tune of almost $170,000. And then they turned around and sued that person individually and sued that company to recover their loss. Don't lie on insurance forms. It'll come back and bite you really bad every time.
Addison, I know you've had your hand up on the chat for a while. You want to dive in?
Yeah, actually, I had a follow-up question to what you asked, but it looks like it's been answered now. I was going to ask, what is the practical consequences of deviation from the Sephora rules? But I think Mike already answered that question, so I'm good. Thanks.
Cool.
I can share my experience. I have one incident during my VFR solo training, and I was flying solo, and I came back, and somebody told me, you need to call this number. And then I called, and the guy said, well, we can see you in our radar, but we cannot see your altitude. And I said I was squawking 1226, but I went back, and it was on standby, not alt. So it was a very friendly call. He said, you know, just go and check your plane and make sure it's everything is okay. And I did, and he said, okay, have a nice Thanksgiving, because it was Thanksgiving basically. So that was basically my experience, but it was really nerve-wracking when I landed and somebody said, oh, you need to call this number. So that was something I want to share.
Interesting. Hey, Nate, I saw you posted something in the chat. Do you want to kind of go over your thoughts on that?
Yeah, since the topic was like the restricted and prohibited airspace or special use airspace, just the thought that on most depictions, if you look at P40 and R4009 over the top of Camp David, the depiction looks like it's a 20 nautical mile diameter piece of airspace that sets over the top of that prohibited and restricted airspace. It's my understanding that that is the way it looks like on the chart, but that's a 3 nautical mile radius for both P40 and R4009 under normal operations that can be extended via NOTAM out to 5 nautical miles. But that 20 nautical mile radius dashed line around the depiction on the chart is a little misleading, and the chart tells you that R4009 sets directly over the top of P40. I don't know if anybody's got a contrary position, but I believe that's the case.
Mike, you answer this one. You got to unmute, Mike.
He's just going to leave it muted.
I just keep hitting my space bar. Before I answer the question, I do want to go back to the pilot records. I did put a link in the database. I believe if you register with the pilot records, you can pull up your own information, and all you need is an email address to do it, because I just did that myself. As far as the airspace is concerned.
Hey, Mike, does it provide you violation information?
It does.
Oh, it does now. Okay.
It does. The link I just put in there does. You have to register to get it. Thanks for that, Gary. Now, this is like a 4-part question that you've asked, Nate. The first part, and we'll keep it real simple. You are correct that P40 goes from the surface to 5,000 feet, and that is prohibited airspace. Thou shalt not enter it, and that is what is depicted as about the 5-mile ring or whatever it is, 3-mile ring around Camp David. Directly atop that is R4009. And I think that goes up to 10,000 feet or some such. I'd have to double check the
18, I think.
12.5.
12.5?
I'd have to double check the chart to make sure where R4009 completely goes up to. I don't remember that one. This is the airspace the way it always exists. If we just look at that center circle, that's what we're talking about when we talk about P40 and R4009. The dashed area that goes out 10 nautical miles from Camp David, let's just call it what it is only effective when the presidential TFR is in place. There were quite a few airspace violations because it was not charted and the TFRs would pop up randomly and people weren't sure of what was going on, that we convinced the charting office to permanently put it on here because Camp David was being used quite frequently by the Bush presidency, and that's where we got it finally put on the chart. But for the student pilots in the room, I want to ask an airspace question. So for all the non-CFIs or DPEs, what do you have to do to fly through restricted airspace?
You have to call the controlling authority or contact the controlling authority before you do that and request permission, I think.
Who else would like to try their hand at this question?
So Mike, I could be on an IFR flight plan and actually do that.
I would say you can fly through it unless it's active.
Where do you find out if it's active, Ahmed?
You know, there's in the chart, they tell you when it's exactly it will be active and the altitude. So that's my understanding. So you check the chart and make sure it's not active. Because when I flew to Tangier, for example, there are some restricted airspace there before you reach Tangier. And I checked and I see exactly what's the altitude for the restricted airspace. And if it's hot, you cannot go through it.
You get the gold star because you got the correct answer. Check the chart, make sure the airspace is not active, and if it's not active, go fly right through it. You don't need permission or anything.
This is John. I've got a question for Gary. Is Gary on?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, so you see an aircraft approaching a restricted airspace and it is not active. It's been turned over to you. It's not active. What do? Anything?
I don't do anything.
Okay.
If he's going to clear the airspace, to us, there's no need to alert him. We get it all the time, especially with P40, people asking. So if you're level at 5,000 feet, you clear P40 under normal conditions. If you're at 4,999 feet, you violated it. Our radar doesn't pick up a single foot increment, so until you hit 4,900 feet, we don't even know. However, if it's active, I'm going to say something in time to divert you. That's if I catch it. You're never going to be routed through an active one. Well, I shouldn't say never because some people screw up, but you shouldn't be routed through one. But if you're off course or you're shortcutted or you're VFR flight following, I'm going to call it out to you with enough time to turn you and keep you clear of it. With regards to P40 and R4009, the altitudes that were issued or that are published, they hardly are ever used. When it's activated, they go up to flight level 180 within the 10-mile ring. It's squawking and talking IFR only. Within the 30, I think it's squawking and talking, or within the 10, it's only air carriers. It changes a little bit every time they activate it, but it's kind of deceiving because what it depicts on the sectional chart, the Secret Service, when they activate it, they tend to change it anyways and make it more restrictive. But as far as someone headed towards a restricted area, if it's cold, I'm usually not saying anything. So.
Okay, thank you. Good to have that perspective.
Are we done with this chart? I can drop it down now.
From my days of working at AOPA, when all this was getting created right after 9/11, you're right, Gary. Every time the Secret Service activates this, you really should read the NOTAM because it really depends on who all's there, the duration, how much this thing's going to get tweaked in terms of who can fly through it. There are instances where the airlines are kept above 18,000 feet as they're inbound to Dulles or Reagan National or BWI because that area is active. The practical side of it is just kind of pretend that that's always extended out to that blue dashed line and avoid the outside edge as much as possible. And if you make that your practice, you'll probably stay out of trouble when it really does go active because you're constantly making yourself aware of that. That's a restricted or prohibited area. And that's the one I think they're really serious about.
I'll also throw it out there. If you're not sure, 126.82, hey, Potomac, what's the status of P40? And we don't have a problem telling you. We don't have to radar identify you. It's not a lot of work for us. Just, November 123, we're looking for the status of P40. I probably won't even look for you. I'll just answer your question and move on to my next traffic. So,
what's that frequency again?
You can find it on any of the charts. It's actually 2682 is the sector that owns that airspace.
Okay.
But it's always combined with others. The departure frequency out of Leesburg, I think, is advertised on the publications as 26.1, which should not be, but it is. that sector combines with 2682.
Right.
But any of those frequencies in that area for those airports, if you look at one of the airports in that area and their departure frequencies, that's going to put you where you need to be.
Well, and that's why I ask you that question again, because I think it's good that people realize that that's actually a Potomac frequency, Potomac departure arrival frequency, that it's not flight service station, because sometimes the 2662, sometimes, was that 122.62 or what? So I think it's good you clarified that.
And one story about this this airspace, if you look about an inch below Hagerstown, you're going to see a drag strip, and it's charted. We had a flight instructor out of Leesburg with a student that flew up there to show his student where the drag strip.
You muted, Mike.
I'm getting good at that tonight. Am I muted now? Yeah.
No.
No.
I was going to mention there's a drag strip about an inch below Hagerstown on the chart. It is a charted drag strip. And at Leesburg a few years back, we had an instructor with a student who went up there to show the student how far too far was, and they violated the TFR and the prohibited airspace.
Wow. It's right there by the there you go.
Right there.
It. That's it.
Yeah.
And the instructor did get a little time off without pay for busting the airspace. So
can you guys see me move my cursor?
Yes.
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
It looks like a Mickey Mouse hand.
Now, part of the story of that is also that don't count on your GPS to be accurate as you get close to some of these national security areas. It's not precise, and the signals are dithered to create ambiguity. So just don't go by what you see on your chart and what's on your GPS.
So I was going to expand what I said. Anywhere in the country, if you're approaching airspace you're not familiar with, if you look at an airport close by and find that departure frequency, I'm sure there's other ways you can find it too, but that's a quick, easy way to do it. That's going to be the controlling, the controller that owns that airspace, that's going to be their frequency. And if you do what I said and you ask them, hey, we're just checking the status of, I don't know, Area 51, it doesn't matter. Even if you get the grumpy controller, he's still going to answer your question. You're going to still get what you need. And who cares if he's grumpy? He's the one having a bad day, not you. And he's still sitting in his chair working. If you violate restricted airspace, it doesn't affect him, it affects you. So ask the question. Don't be intimidated by controllers. If you are intimidated or you feel like there's a problem, ask them for their supervisor's phone number. They have to give it to you. So don't be intimidated by us, guys. I mean, we're just people. So.
And most of them aren't going to give you a hard time, because once the comm inbound has made it on the tape, they're probably going to be responsive on the outbound, because the last thing they want is that, hey, I called Potomac on the right frequency. Go check the tape, and yeah, there it is, and no one's responding. That none of the controllers want to do any more work than they have to. Don't take that the wrong way, Gary.
Well, no, I work with them all day, and even myself, if I'm having a bad day, sometimes I come off grumpy, but it doesn't matter. We still have a job to do, and we have to do it. So if we refuse a service without a reason or a service that is required of us to do, that's on us, and that's when it is going to affect our job. So they're going to do it. They may not like it, but like I said, you would be the one getting in trouble, so make them do their job. That being said, my break is over, so if I can answer maybe one more quick question if anyone had anything. Otherwise, I got to go move some. Wait, no, we're not moving airplanes. We're just staring at scope. So
pushing 10.
Gary, thank you as always for your insight, man. Appreciate it, man.
Very good, Gary.
all right. I told Gabe that I'm willing to do an air traffic specific one too. Starting Friday, we're rotating our schedules, so I'll be off for a while. But everybody have a good night and good luck.
You too, buddy. See ya.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
As a pilot who flies out of Hagerstown, I can say without question, without fail, flying a lot of IFR, they have us go out to the VOR before turning east. And I've gone over top of P40 a good bit. And Potomac does a phenomenal job of making sure that you've got the correct altimeter setting, that your altitude readout matches what they're showing on the screens. I've always had nothing but great things to say about Potomac, from VFR flight following to, like I said, how they watch out for you over P40. And another neat thing flying out of Hagerstown, you can always tell the tower controllers get real nervous when anyone wants to go flying when P40 is expanded.
Thanks, Ray.
And I will add, flying out of Frederick as a student, one great thing our school did was really enforces where it is, but I didn't learn until my stage 1 oral check that 009 sits on top. And that's one thing I missed on my oral. So for your CFIs, make sure we reinforce that. And as I sit here tonight, I'm right on the lower edge of the outer ring anyway, here on the west side of Frederick. But I know the schools here in Frederick try to do a good job of teaching their students, both from a pilotage point of view and a common sense point of view, to avoid the whole area.
I was just talking to myself. Yeah, I'm pulling a mic.
That's the thing tonight, Gabe.
One Schwartz is enough for us tonight, Gabe. We can only handle one. We need you to unmute.
Man,
watch it, fish.
Disappointed in
By
myself.
the way, I just checked the link that was sent by Mike, and I registered as we were talking here, and I could get access to records. I was just talking about
That's awesome. Thanks, Vic. So I see Frank made it in. Nice to see you, Frank, and Tim as well, Tim Corden. But I don't see any other questions here in the chat. So if anybody has anything, feel free to jump in, or any suggestions or thoughts from CFI's DPs.
So if you're flying the Hudson River corridor, I haven't done it. So I know there is a special training and other things. What are the other considerations or experiences flying that corridor?
There's other options to it as well. You can get a Class Bravo clearance. That's called the Skyline route.
Okay.
I've done it that way most of the time, and it's way easier and takes a lot of the stress and edge off of doing that safari, particularly if you're a single pilot. I'd recommend doing it that way if you're going single pilot.
What is that called again, Walter?
It's called the Skyline route. It's in the Class Bravo. Anywhere 1,500 feet to 3,000 is where they clear you. Usually 1,500 or 2,000.
Okay.
The Hudson River route does demand a lot of attention, as Walter said. You have to be familiar with the landmarks, and you can do that by taking the course or watching some videos. You got to watch your altitudes pretty closely too, because there are helicopters a couple hundred feet below you and above you. So,
okay.
But on either route, it's a great view and something you should do. Take an instructor with you.
Yep.
I want to say what 5 years ago or so. I think we took a group up there. Who was on that flight that's on this call? Mike, did you go, or somebody? Okay, yeah, maybe it was a totally different group, but there was a good 7 or 8 airplanes that we took.
I took them out a couple of years ago. Okay.
That's what it was. Yeah, Greg. I knew there was somebody. Yeah, that was a ton of fun.
County.
Yes, Orange County, exactly.
Yeah,
that was awesome. Sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to cut you off there, buddy.
No, that's okay. I've taken several groups up the corridor, and I think probably the key thing is do the online course. You do have to complete that to fly through the Hudson River corridor, like you do the DC special area. That's available at FAAsafety.gov.
Mm-hmm.
It takes about an hour to complete. But me flying with the group of planes through the corridor, probably the most stressful thing for the entire flight was all of the helicopter traffic.
Yeah.
We stayed in the corridor, which kept us pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
They were worse than birds. They were everywhere. And you really have to keep your head on a swivel for the helicopter traffic.
Okay.
But you can't beat the view of the New York City, Central Park, the river and all that stuff. It's just amazing what you can actually do in an airplane.
So when you fly the corridor, do you go through it and come out the other way, or do you actually have to turn back and come back out? Just curious.
When we did it, we flew up to just north of the Tappan Zee Bridge, and we turned around and we flew south. And some folks went to White Plains and landed. Some got over towards Teterboro and landed.
Okay.
Flew back to Monmouth and landed. Others went to other airports in the New Jersey area for lunch. And kind of we hit the Tappan Zee. Then people were free to either fly back with the lead or do whatever they wanted to do. It was at your discretion.
Okay.
Mike, this is Mark. I've never done the corridor flight. Maybe one day I'll screw up the courage to do it. When you're flying in that corridor, the helicopters are flying also, but aren't they flying on designated flyways that you could find on a supplemental chart? They're not?
Not in the corridor. The corridor is supplemental flyway.
Oh, okay. All right.
Under 1,000 feet in that whole special flight rules area for the Hudson, under 1,000 feet is considered local, where you can come and go left, right, circle, go northbound, then immediately make a U-turn, go southbound. From 1,000 to 1,200 is where they're looking for you to pick a direction and go north or go south and stick to your lane. And then, of course, if you're above that, you're with your clearance in the Bravo.
Right. Okay. Good information to know.
Our friend Martin Pauly put a video up of him running the corridor a year or so ago on YouTube. I watched it here recently. It's a little bit fascinating. It's a good trial run for somebody that has never done it. I found it very informative.
One other thing you can do, which is nice, you can head up the corridor to the north, and if you talk to LaGuardia, they'll give you a Bravo clearance you can climb and then drop into the East River exclusion and kind of see the other side of New York City. You've got to be talking to ATC to get into that East River exclusion, but being able to come down the east side of the city is another nice view. And there's a TFR, and there's a presidential TFR around the Trump Tower that gets pretty close out to near where the Intrepid is at, coming over the Hudson. So just being mindful, especially when you're asking to make the turn over Central Park, being mindful of where that TFR is at is awareness of.
Yeah, Greg, I remember when we went up there with Kleben was with us, and I was flying with him, and we got up there to Orange County, and when we were getting ready to come back, there was a TFR that popped up because of the Patriots game, and we couldn't get back through, so we had to go all the way out west. But I remember that flight very well. That was a lot of fun.
John, you were there too, weren't you?
Yep, that was a good flight.
Yeah, that's right. John, heck, I think I was flying with you. We were filling up in Monmouth, I think, together, right? You were in 172 Hotel Fox.
Hotel
maybe?
Fox, yeah, with the owner. Yeah.
Yep. I remember that.
Brian, that video you were talking about, it would be a great idea if you could find that and send the link to Gabe so he can post it on the Smokehouse Pilot webpage.
Yeah, sure thing. I'll try to snag that tonight.
Hey, Clay, I see you just popped in here. Nice to see you, man. It looks like you had a fun flight today. Can't see that. I can't read it. Oh, nice. It says Smokehouse on his hat. Very cool. How was your flight today?
Hear me okay?
I just unmuted you. There
Okay, now you can hear me. It was fun, fantastic. You know, Dulles was When I was there in the pattern on runway 1 right, there was probably 7 that took off on 30 and 2 that landed on 1C. So had the whole place to myself.
That's crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Are you the Satabria guy?
Decathlon.
Decathlon? Okay.
Yeah. Yep, I'm down in Culpeper.
Okay.
Hey,
I don't know if this is for a special airspace question, but it's an airspace question in general. When I'm flying down Florida, Leesburg, down to like, say, Tampa, usually around, like odd altitudes are east and even altitudes are west. Whether I'm IFR or VFR, at somewhere around the Ocala VFR, VOR, they always switch me to the opposite. Is there some sort of unwritten rule or written rule that in Florida, sort of south of Ocala, they change to north-south, odd and, odd altitudes and even altitudes, or do they just do that out of habit from in ATC?
Well, it'd be nice if Gary was still in here.
I got nothing. I don't know unless it's something to do with the Bravo airspace and everything from and the airspace with Orlando and West Palm and everything as you get further south. It may be an airspace issue.
Or it's just Florida.
There's lots of.
I was going to go with they just do things backwards in Florida.
Well, but there's lots of different controlling facilities for the airspace down there, and there's a lot of restricted areas, there are military operating areas, and there's also a lot of what they call these inter-facility letters of agreement on how traffic is going to get handled at what altitudes and what bearings and directions and such. We as pilots really don't know about that kind of stuff. And that's a lot of times why you get assigned to fly a different altitude because of things like that, because it's how ATC manages the traffic flow or the workload.
Yeah, so one time they had some issue with the workload, and I was on an IFR flight plan, and they told me, if you want to stay at that altitude, in this case, plus 500, I had to go to VFR. Otherwise, they had to climb me up to like 14,000 or something. I think I was at maybe 12. And I told them I'd go to 11.5 and drove VFR. So anyway, I continue my flying, and maybe about half hour later, I sort of almost forgot I was now VFR, and I noticed on my G1000 display that I was coming up on some restricted airspace. So I quick did a 360 to not bust the airspace because I thought I was technically VFR, and the ATC guys come back and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, well, I seen I'm not familiar with the airspace," and they came up on the VFR sectional as a, restricted airspace. And they said, "Oh, well, we still have your IFR plan active. We just don't have you." I forget what terminology they used. But basically, they were sort of criticizing me for making that U-boat because they expected me to keep flying, even though they pushed me to, in this case, it was an even altitude plus 500. So I never really understood what was going on down in Florida, and I just seemed that if I'm ever not IFR, it's sort of too complicated. At least at like between 10 to 14,000 feet, I never know what they're going to do. Anyway,
if you're on an IFR flight plan,
yeah,
you should always ask before you make a turn like that. And if you're on an IFR flight plan, you're under positive ATC control, and they do a really good job of keeping you out of airspace you shouldn't go in. Probably if you just asked the question and said, "Hey, I'm at this altitude, but I'm headed for this whatever this airspace is it hot or cold?" They just said, "Yeah, just keep on going. It's cold today. Don't worry about it. We still have you."
Yeah, what I'm saying is they can't explicitly canceled my IFR and dropped me to a odd altitude plus 500.
They canceled your IFR.
I canceled it. I should say I canceled it.
Oh, that's
Right?
different.
They said if you wanted to go VFR, you can. I said, okay, cancel my IFR. I'll go VFR. And that's when I realized I encroached that airspace. I didn't encroach it. I made the U-boat, but that's the direction I was headed.
Well, in that situation, you were okay. It just took them by surprise that you made the 180. But turn that off.
Mark, is that a house phone?
Yeah, it's a house phone. I'm in my home office here, so you know.
Absolutely. Greg, did you have your hand up a minute ago?
Yeah, Gabe. I did a lot of training in Florida, and I did ask the question. This is a couple of years ago. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But it was because of the volume of traffic traveling north and south. They orient it in the shape of Florida because of traversing Florida is typically up and north and south. They change it that way. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. But it was something that I remember a controller telling me when we asked the question.
Yeah, and if you look at that route from Gators, the way that they clear you down, it's like Gators to Ocala to Lakeland. It's more or less north-south. It's like 354, 174.
So it was just a comment more than anything else. I don't know whether it's completely true or not, but that was what I was told by a controller.
Frank, are you flying down to Florida often? I don't recall. I mean, are you going down there?
Yeah, I go down maybe every other month or so.
Gotcha. Okay.
A handful of times, maybe 6 to 8 times a year or something like that.
Cool. We just had a question on the chat from someone. Are DPE still testing during this COVID-19 period, asking for IFR specifically?
I am.
This is John. I am not. I've suspended my activity.
Anecdotally, I'm part of a couple different IFR groups on Facebook, and I see every day I see 2 or 3 people passing their IFR check ride in different parts of the country. So that's anecdotal, but I think it's probably very specific. You know, every DPE is probably kind of setting their own schedule.
Well, the FAA has left it up to the examiners, the FSDO. They ask us to use appropriate precautions, but they leave it up to us, and that's a personal decision.
Yeah, this question has come up a lot, and according to the federal government, and Gabe, I think I sent the link to you for that page.
Yep.
Flight training, aircraft maintenance, flight schools are all considered critical infrastructure for the country. So they are in that group of industries that are permitted to remain open and active. A lot of flight schools have voluntarily decided not to remain open, and I applaud them for that effort. But there's still a lot of people that are, you know, right in the middle of training, and you know, they're stuck between a rock and a hard spot. They've been waiting for an examiner. That now this has come up, and I have selectively agreed to do some check rides. I'm not doing a lot of it because obviously there's not a lot of training that's being conducted right now. But if I get the call, depending on where it is, I will do the check. I'm not going over to Baltimore or DC or up to New York or places like that where there's high risk areas, but I am doing some limited check ride stuff.
As an instructor, I've suspended actual dual instruction in an aircraft. I'm just not going to risk getting too close and personal with somebody else. I know who I've been in contact with, but I don't know who they've been in contact with. And my health is too important to stop. So I'm going to do my best to physically distance myself. But if I can provide ground instruction through Zoom or something else, through these webinars, which has been a great vehicle for this, I'm certainly happy to come out here and provide my 2 cents and listen to what Tim has to say as well.
And to all the instructors and people that you know that are instructors, try to keep your people engaged, your students. Find reasons to get together to go over ground topics. There's always room to go through something on ground, as Mike said, because this could last for a while, and we want to keep people on top of things. This is a great venue. ForeFlight is going to be doing some videos. Krish, I think you made some posts about that. There are some weather things coming up. If anyone is on Facebook and you see the guy WX Risk, he's out of Richmond, somewhere around Richmond. They're doing weather schools to teach people who know nothing about weather, more about weather, or even if you do know something, maybe you can pick up some additional details. So there are a lot of great resources that are still available out there for your students.
Hey, John. I just started Billy Winburn and Mindstar Community Aviation's IFR course. It's fantastic.
Okay. Yeah, he sent me a link. I haven't had a chance to try it yet.
It's really good.
Yeah, I looked at that. It's amazing. It's
great.
Very cool.
Hey, Mike, are you still doing any inspecting?
I'm not doing in-route inspections currently, no, sir.
Okay. Yeah, we shut down our entire training department, so I was just curious with that. I'm sure that's probably all the way around.
Yeah, we've been told only essential traffic, mission critical travel is allowed. Otherwise, we've already been told shelter in place, stay at home, and telework at least until the end of April.
I wish. We I have two captain upgrades that I'm doing, and that's it. Everything else has been shut down. They sent everybody home. So it's hitting us pretty hard for sure.
I'm definitely not on vacation. My calendar has exploded with webinars and meetings and Zooms and things, and I'm actually having to say, listen, you're gonna have to pull something off my plate because there's too much. I can't make every meeting you want me to attend now.
Yeah.
Hey, Tim or Walter, do you know if Stassi's Redbird is in usable condition? Or they have it up and running?
Yeah, it's up and running. He would like us to use it during this time. I reminded him that you're still not 6 feet away from people sitting in the Redbird, unless I'm sitting outside. But Stassi and I have talked a little bit about maybe implementing something where the instructor's remote, logs in remote, and the student can be inside the Redbird flying. The instructor can still monitor. The instructor can pause. The instructor can change weather and conditions and failures and all that stuff for them. The only question I have that I don't know that we're going to get any answer to specifically is if I've got an instructor sitting at home or in my office and I've got a student in the Redbird, can the student log that time? Can the instructor virtually sign via, any electronic logbooks, all that kind of stuff? My guess is the FAA is probably not that caught up on this stuff and probably wants the two people sitting right next to each other. But we haven't, once we can get everything finalized with an instructor doing it and tested a few times, my plan is to ask the FSDO that question specifically and see if we can actually log time, or will it just be purely experience? If it's just purely experience, then I'm not quite sure how we can charge students the entire full rate. But if it's loggable, that'd be great.
Yeah, okay, great. I'd like to see that go forward too.
I am good friends with the national coordinator for the ATD world, and I'll drop him an email in the morning and ask him that question, Tim.
Thank you, sir.
Peter, you had written to me about something with your work with the ATDs back in the day, in terms of the approaches and all that. Do you want to talk about that really quick?
Krish, I don't know. It was a little tough to hear you on that, Krish. Just a little bit.
No, I was just saying, Peter had sent me an email earlier today regarding his work with the ATDs back in the day. So I was wondering if he wants to talk about that for a quick second. Peter, hang on, you're on mute.
Let me see if I can get him unmuted here real quick.
You're setting jinx to Saul, Gabe.
I know, right?
Here we go.
There we go.
Unfortunately, that was probably a good 20 years ago, and I was fighting with flight standards to give as much credit for simulators as possible. And they came up with the idea of, okay, let's have something called a simulator and something else called an ATD or whatever. And they wanted to give as little credit for the ATD as possible. But I did win some battles. That was a long time ago, and I don't know what the current allowance might be.
I guess we are enjoying the benefits of whatever work you did back in the day. So thank you.
I'll bet Mr. Schwartz can find that out when he sends his email.
Well, the simple answer for an IFR perspective is if you're part 61, you can use the AATD for up to 50% of your training hours. And if you're 141, it's 40% of your hours. So that's about 14.3 hours for IFR and 20 hours for part 61. For part 141, 14.3, 20 hours for part 61. You can use an ATD for, I believe, 3 hours of training for private in part 61. I don't think you can use it for any in most of the syllabuses I've seen for 141.
So for the private, it's 2.5 hours under 61.
Okay.
What about logging approaches, Mike, for currency?
The FAA has said that you can log approaches for currency in a AATD.
You're muted again.
You went mute again, Mike.
You keep doing that, don't you? You're just trying to mess with me tonight.
I'm not.
I think somebody's messing with me, Gabe.
It's not me.
You didn't give Tim the controls, did you?
Does anybody else have control? I don't know.
I plead the fifth on this one. I plead the fifth.
A fifth of what? Vodka?
Yeah, Jack Daniels. I'm talking about you,
I saw you
Schwartz.
drinking that beer there, Tim.
The FAA changed the rule a couple of years ago, and you can actually use an AATD to maintain currency. You can shoot approaches in it as long as you're not outside of your 12 months for where you would need an IPC. You can shoot your approaches in an AATD and maintain currency. Normal rules apply, holds, intercepting and tracking radials, and approaches, and you're fine. The only thing you cannot do in a Redbird full motion AATD is circling approaches. The good thing is they're not required for currency, so until you get to the IPC stage, you can Redbird away and it all counts. Just make sure you log it as an AATD, a Redbird. If you can even put the serial number in your logbook and the approaches that you shot and the holds you did, that's all you really have to record. For instructors, when you give dual in a Redbird, you need to record the instrument time, the dual time, and that you're in an AATD.
So Frank, it looks like Gary jumped back on, but according to his webcam, I think he might just have it on the scope there where he works. So I don't know if he's at his computer or not to answer that question you had on the altitude levels, but when he's back, maybe we can ask him again. Can everybody see his screen? It looks like he's got the scope of where he works out there.
Yeah, it looks like it. Nice.
Looks just like we're Looks like
Can we ask questions on here non-attribution?
Say that again, Frank.
Can we ask questions on here non-attribution? I guess not.
Frank, we know that if a question gets asked anonymously, we now know it was you. So
yeah. Okay, good. Well, anyway,
question.
Can you, in terms of login approaches for instrument currency, does a full course reversal on an actual instrument approach count as a hold?
I would say no, because it's not a hold. It's an entry to a hold, but it's not a hold. Entry to a possible.
So if likewise, if you have a hold but it's not a full 360, you get cut out early, is that acceptable? And does the hold have to be an actual?
Okay, you got two questions there. I don't understand what you mean by cut out early.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean, if I'm doing a practice if I'm under instrument flight plan, I get put into a hold and I'm in actual conditions, and then prior to the end of that hold, I'm moved off to, you know, continue my flight. Does that count?
Yeah, in that case, I would count it because the maneuver they assigned you to do was a hold, not a course reversal. That course reversal may be associated with an approach, but your ATC instruction was to go and hold.
Okay.
It's kind of like a letter that the FAA came out with a few years back that can you count an approach for currency if you're flying the approach and you break out before the airport and you break out into VMC conditions? And that's always been a bit kind of a question mark in a lot of people's minds. And the FAA came out with this position that says, if you've started the maneuver simply because you've descended on that approach and broken out into VFR conditions, you started to fly an instrument approach. So you can count that approach for currency, even though you may be completing the approach to the runway in VMC conditions. And Gabe, I will find that letter and send it to you.
Prior to the initial fix? So if I'm on vectors, it still counts?
Prior to the initial, yeah. And if you're on vectors prior to the initial fix, yes, absolutely. It still counts because you were planning on and you were assigned to do an instrument approach.
I'm good with that. I'll keep logging.
Happens a lot down in Florida, doesn't it?
You got your question there, Frank, answered? You good?
Yeah, I think so.
Can I add something to that thing on the instrument approach? It's Bob Garrity. Can you hear me?
Bob.
Hi. Hey, I believe the rule is if you're flying single pilot without a safety pilot, you have to be in weather conditions somewhat less than VFR conditions somewhere between the final approach fix and landing. And if you're all clear from that point on, then you can't log it as an instrument approach. I'll defer that to Mark, but I believe that's the rule now.
Oh, so you're saying from the final?
From the final approach fix inbound to landing, somewhere in there, you have to be in actual weather, less than VFR conditions.
Yeah,
maybe Mike can clarify that. That's an FAA thing, but that's the way it's been for a while, as far as I know.
I'll have to review that letter, but I was under a different interpretation. But Bob, you may very well be correct on that. But I'll get the letter out and get it to Greg so he can, or Gabe, so he can post it.
I seem to recall that was either a legal interp or maybe a comment in the preamble text where they updated the regulations for ATDs and currency requirements. But I do believe you do have to be an IMC until you're inside of the final approach fix to count it as an approach.
What if you just close your eyes for 10 minutes?
See the void.
Actually, with regard to the
Then we get to
holding
talk
pattern,
about spatial disorientation.
yeah, with regard to the holding pattern and whether or not you can log it, if there is a holding pattern that takes you to the final approach fix and you are given a vector into that holding pattern, you don't have to go 360 degrees. You can do like 270 or something like that. As long as you're in the holding pattern for part of it, you do get credit for entering a holding pattern.
So we've got a question here on the chat for anyone. In BMC, if a plane flying a practice IFR approach is flying straight into a runway, and there are a number of planes in the pattern for the opposite runway, who has, quote, the right of way for landing?
Hey, before you guys answer it, I was actually there, and I had an IFR, I guess, Vision Jet coming in straight at me at Winchester, and I chickened out, just so you know. I chickened out, and I went to the side, and I said, okay, I'll fly another downwind pattern and land, but I thought I had the right of way. I was lower than the Vision Jet was and closer to the runway, and I'd made my calls, but that being said.
It used to be that if you flew into Manassas and you're in the pattern and Colgan Airways was coming the opposite direction, they'd come in and land even downwind sometimes and just kind of bust up the whole pattern. So just be advised that people are going to do some strange things at different airports.
Yeah, and they made a clarification here. This would be at obviously an uncontrolled airport. John Somiak, do you have anything on that, or?
Well, when I talk to instructors about that, I give them scenarios of what if. If you're at a lower altitude in the pattern and there's a citation on a 10-mile final, who's going to take the right of way? Are you going to, in your 172, say, I'm lower, I'm going to land, and I'm going to pull in front of this citation? Or are you going to do the common sense thing and let the faster aircraft land? So by the regs, yeah, the lower aircraft has the right of way, but what's common sense about it?
Another thing to consider at non-towered airports is quite often if there's other mitigating airspace, let's say the Dulles, Bravo, Leesburg without the tower, quite often if we have a larger Gulfstream or something taking off going internationally, they're very heavy, loaded with lots of fuel. They can only take off on 3.5 if runway 17 is the active runway, and they will take off and they will come straight at you even if you are on final.
It just seems to me that and I'm taking IFR lessons now, that if you're on a practice approach, you should listen to the CTAF and then break it off and do a circling approach to join the pattern if you actually want to land. Wouldn't that be sort of the right thing to do if you're that IFR plane?
Yeah, so well, the question would be, are you on an IFR plan doing the approaches, or are you just VFR doing a practice approach? If you're on an IFR plan, Potomac's going to be watching you as long as they have radar coverage and give you traffic call-outs. But they're not talking to the other aircraft, so it's still back to you on see and avoid, even if you're on an IFR plan, to make sure you're not going to run into them. Now, at Leesburg, it's a little different. If you're on a practice approach and you tell the tower you're on a practice approach, you must break off that approach 10 miles out. If you're coming in VFR or coming in on a practice approach, you don't tell them you're on a practice approach, they'll let you come in closer, and they kind of know what you're doing. But it's still back to you on see and avoid.
Fly practice approaches under IFR, not IMC, VMC, but we would fly them and we'd tell either the tower operator or other traffic, if it wasn't a towered airport, that we were going to break it off at 2 miles or something like that and start the circle.
On the specific example that I witnessed, it actually wasn't a practice approach. The guy was a two-piston aircraft. There were 3 in the pattern, and this guy came in on runway 4 at Culpeper and just came straight in and landed, even though there was a bunch of us in the pattern for the opposite runway. And it was just a little surprising that he did that in VMC instead of listening to CTAF, understanding what the pattern was, and, you know, just changing to a visual, visual circling approach.
I think that's just a discourteous pilot who feels he has privilege, and that's unfortunate. If it's a crystal clear day and you're on an actual approach and you insist on coming in straight in, regardless of who's in the pattern, then that's just foolish. So sometimes there aren't very many cures for that.
You should have told him to write down a number.
Or you can talk to them on the ground when they land. Please don't do it on CTAF, but I have talked to people on the ground. So.
Well, that's why that's why I actually asked the question, because I didn't know who was more or less in the right. So I wasn't going to go talk to him and give him grief when I was, when we in the pattern were in the wrong. So that's why I thought I'd ask this group.
If I recall, in the latest advisory circular on untowered airport operations, there's no mention of a straight in having any kind of priority. It still goes back to the right-of-way rules.
Yeah.
We fly into a lot of untowered airports in the UP, and with typically a fair amount of traffic. And the biggest thing that I've found is communication. We'll make a call 20 miles out, make 15 miles out, 10 miles out on final, and we're typically straight in off of an IFR flight plan, but they'll let us go 15 miles out. And if somebody's in the pattern, we try to make sure that we are talking to them and let them know, hey, we're running 150 knots or 100 200 knots across the ground, depending on what the wind's doing. And just communication is always key, and I've never had a problem. If you're in doubt, always just ask, hey, how fast are you? Am I going to be able to get in time for you? It's common courtesy as well.
Yeah. And I think most anyone in the pattern or nearby, if they are talking to someone, a faster aircraft coming in, don't let them come in.
Yeah, in this case, it was two piston air. I mean, we were all pistons, single engine pistons. So speed priority for, a jet was not the issue.
Okay.
But thank you for your comments.
All right, guys, I'm not seeing anything else here on the chat. Anybody have any other questions or things you'd like to bring up?
I got a really basic one. I couldn't seem to get a straight answer even out of some of the more experienced guys. And I probably need to redo the Sephora flight rules test since I haven't done it in a while. So I'll do that. But what can you do with your 1226 squawk code? So for instance, the other week or the other month, we did the fly out to Easton, and I was coming back around the north side, and I was like, I wonder if I can just shoot in the Vale from the east here under 1226 and kind of tuck under BWI's Bravo airspace to kind of shortcut my way through.
That'll get you a violation.
Okay.
1226 is only valid in the Leesburg maneuvering area.
Okay.
Once you're in the CFRA. Now, if you're practicing west of Leesburg, between Winchester, Martinsburg, up toward Frederick, they don't mind if you leave 1226 in and you're coming back in. But anywhere else, that's not a valid code.
Okay, so so let's say even if you're coming up from the south, let's say from Richmond, and you're getting ready to come through the Vale, are you still technically supposed to call because you're from the south, not from the west, as opposed to just talking 1226?
No, if you're squawking 1200 from the south, As you get closer to Leesburg, get ready to turn, switch it back over to 1226 and then enter from the west as you normally would.
Okay, yeah, but specifically, if I'm looking to just enter the mode C veil, where traditionally we wouldn't have to, call air traffic control to get into the veil, coming from the west, can you do the same from the south, or do we need to call air traffic control from the south?
If I answer your question correctly, you would want to contact air traffic control and get a discrete squawk code. Then you could enter the SFRA and fly direct Leesburg from the south.
So I actually walked out of the control room to talk about this because we were talking about it today among controllers. If you are going anywhere in the SFRA other than the Leesburg maneuvering area, you have to file an SFRA flight plan, period. End of conversation. You can't, if you're getting flight following from outside the area and you're coming back into Leesburg and you have not filed an SFRA flight plan, you have to squawk the appropriate code for Leesburg, which we're not allowed to tell you. You have to know it and follow those procedures. What has been happening, and I'm trying to fight it on our end, is some of our controllers are not doing this. They're not aware of the pilot's requirements, and they're, oh, well, he's getting flight following, I'm just going to let him stay on that code. And as a pilot, you're like, well, I'm talking to Potomac, I'm good to go. If you have not filed an SFRA flight plan, don't set yourself up for a violation or a failure. Tell them, thank you for your service, we're going to terminate and go to the Leesburg code, and do it on your own. I've argued with some of our controllers that 3 or 4 times, and they just don't care. They don't see it as a problem. They say the NRCC doesn't care. They allow you to go in. They allow you to do it. That's wrong. It's just wrong, and I'm trying to fight it on this end. But just so you guys know, if you're doing anything other than ingress and egress from Leesburg, file an SFRA flight plan. And that includes practice approaches. If you're going to go out and do practice approaches that we're providing for you, file a flight plan, just like you would pattern work at Leesburg.
Yeah, and so and maybe I'm not exactly being clear. So, but what I'm referring to is when, let's say I'm coming in from Winchester Airport, right? I could squawk 1226. I can enter the veil without talking to air traffic control. How far around the veil is that valid?
What do you
You're talking
mean
about
by
the mode C veil?
Yeah, the mode C veil.
Mode C.
Mode C veil, you can go anywhere. It's only for the SFRA. The mode C veil it doesn't play a factor for your 1226 code.
But it does allow
what
me
I'm saying?
to not have to talk to air traffic control before I enter.
Right, if you're inside the maneuvering area.
Okay, so okay.
And you know what we mean by that, right? The little triangle.
Yeah, no, I know the maneuvering
Yeah, okay.
area, but it was my understanding that normally where you have to call air traffic control before entering the 30-mile mode veil, for the Bravo airspace, I would normally have to call air traffic control, Cessna 3954 uniform, and then they would call me back. If they use my tail number, I know I'm good to enter the mode C veil, right?
No.
You
don't need permission to enter the mode C veil. That is for air traffic movement purposes. You need to have a mode C transponder operating, but you don't need permission to fly into that.
Okay, I thought they had to give me my tail number back for me to have permission.
No.
Okay.
That's class Charlie airspace, not mode C.
That's Bravo clearance.
Right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
a little terminology issue there. Okay.
Gotcha. Sorry for the confusion.
Hey, Gabe.
Yeah.
I found that info letter and just emailed it to you.
Okay.
And I stand corrected. Bob is correct. It's kind of fuzzy on the interpretation, but you do not have to be MC at MDA or decision altitude for the approach to count. And the description it gives is that you're descending on the approach, and as you pass the final approach fix, you transition to IMC and you receive a landing clearance from the control tower. Then you can still log that as an approach for currency. So I probably took a little more liberal interpretation of it, but it does provide for transitioning to VFR at something other than MDA or DH once you're inside the final approach fix.
Okay. Hey, Randy,
there's some other conditions on there too that would cause you to do that. Deviation for safety or things like that. But yes, you can log it as an approach for currency.
Hey, Gabe, before I go back in there, was there another question? You said someone had another question.
Frank had a question, but I don't know that Frank, are you still online? I'm looking at my screen. He's been popping on and off. I think Frank, it does look like he's still on.
Go ahead. What are you saying, Gabe?
Hey, Frank. So we've got Gary on the call again, and I'd love to, have you ask that question about that, the difference in altitudes going down to Florida.
Oh no,
Gary's back online.
In Florida at the Ocala VOR, they typically change me from even altitude. Usually I file like Leesburg, Casanova, Ocala, Tampa, St. Pete, something like that, right? Depends where I'm going. But anyway, Ocala VFR seems to be some sort of threshold for the ATC where they change you from even west altitudes to, in this case, Ocala to Tampa, odd west altitudes. And I'm just curious if that was a policy or just a habit by the ATC guys.
So you're talking IFR too?
IFR and VFR, they both tell me get on the other, get on the right.
So we actually have it here too.
Get on the opposite per se altitudes.
It could be an SOP or an LOA agreement between two sectors or two facilities. We have it here in Potomac. When I hand you off to the James River sector going southbound, we're at the wrong altitude for direction of flight, but it's agreed upon in the SOP. So the traffic coming the other way is wrong as well. And it usually has to do with flow into the, I'm forgetting Florida's airspace right now, what major airport would be there, but it usually has something to do with the flows into the airports where they flip the altitudes, or the direction is just so close that it doesn't matter to us for IFR. It's not very common for us to tell a VFR to fly the wrong altitude unless they're in, and when I say controlled airspace, Bravo or Charlie, where we're talking to every plane and I'm guaranteeing your separation, I'll give you whatever altitude I need you at. It's probably in their SOP or LOA because of the way the airspace is broken up. But without
similarly, coming up here from the south, when do you guys use Linden versus when do you guys use Casanova going into Leesburg from the south? Because sometimes they want me to go Casanova, even I file Linden, then I try and file Casanova, and then they want me to go Linden.
So if you're coming in from Washington Center, I'm just gonna guess, if you're west of Shenandoah Airport talking to Washington Center, they're probably gonna give you Linden. And if you're talking to our James River area in Potomac, they're gonna give you Casanova, and those are the pref routes for them. It's to deconflict the traffic coming from Washington Center and our sector to the south, in case of a Nordo or something else. If you're coming from the southeast, like Norfolk area, or you're coming from the eastern shore around the south side of DC, you're going over Casanova just to keep you away from Dulles and their traffic. I would use Shenandoah Airport as your cutoff, or you could use it, if you're talking to Washington Center, it's Linden. If you're talking to us, it's going to be Casanova.
Gotcha.
Gentlemen, another great night, but I'm going to have to sign off for here. It's extremely valuable. You've asked a lot of good questions. You've caught your examiner up in a couple of things that he had to refresh his memory at, and that's always good for me. So, Gabe, another good meeting. Appreciate you keeping me involved. And gentlemen, till the next time, fly safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark. See ya.
See ya.
Hey, Mark.
See ya. See ya, Bob.
See you, John.
Yeah, so guys, I had just one other, I had one other quick thought, and then, and I wanted to ask Randy, I'm going to come to you in just a second. But for everybody that is still on, we've been wrapping up right at 9 o'clock. So these have been going for about 2 hours each night. And so just to let you know, so we'll wrap up here just in a few minutes. But in the meantime, hey, Randy, I thought you asked a really great question, and Tim answered it this afternoon online. But maybe share your question with the group and what the answer was as far as shooting practice approaches in the SFRA flight plan for those that maybe need that advice.
Yeah, so Tim really gave me some good information. I wanted to know what was the best way to file for practice approaches, specifically out of Manassas, because there's the SFRA. And I was confused in terms of how to set that up so there's real clarity with air traffic control if I were to leave Manassas and then want to do a few approaches like Winchester and maybe down to Shenandoah or wherever and then back. What level of information do I need to give them? And so what I learned was the best way to do is to file IFR. So I wasn't sure if it was better to do it VFR or IFR. And if it was VFR, I was confused as to how that would affect SFRA clearance. So IFR, and then just round robin Manassas to Manassas, and then in the remarks, practice approaches, and just give the airport identifiers. And my understanding is after departure, they'll ask me what my intentions are, and then if I have a plan, basically the approaches they want to do with mist and holding, that's basically starts me off and gets me going. What I'm actually not quite sure of is, what I'm assuming is that it is an IFR flight plan. So I am in the IFR, the instrument system, the IFR system, until I conclude my round robin, I'm assuming. But anyhow, that made it very, very clear for me. I think that was a great explanation.
So I did a lot of approaches out of Manassas when I was flying with the flying club down there. And if we went on a CFR flight plan, we usually went to Casanova first and did the BORA in the Casanova, then we'd go out and do the RNAV4 and break it off. But if we did, if we filed IFR, we could, do like what you said, go round robin and put in where we wanted to go, and then we could change it up in the air. It didn't seem to matter. Of course, we always got the Arsenal 5 out of Manassas. The other thing with filing is sometimes you got to hold on the ground for about 5 to 10 minutes before they cut you loose.
Yeah, I think that my conclusion is that it's always easier to file IFR, even if you got to wait a little bit once you're in the system, as opposed to having to go, I wouldn't really know how. I'd have to have an SFRA back into Manassas and one out, and I don't know, just seemed more confusing. So IFR just seems more straightforward to me.
Well, a lot of times I did with the safety pilot, we would switch off like at Culpeper or Warrenton, and then we'd actually file the SFRA flight plan to get back in when we landed and switched.
Yeah, so I guess it just depends on preference, but I think, I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm down in Sarasota right now, so you guys talking about Florida, so I'm thinking if it's, if it's okay for my social distancing, I'll be going to the airport on Saturday and maybe try and do a few of these approaches. What I don't know, and actually it's a question I want to ask, and Gary's not on, but whether with the...
Oh, he's still on.
Oh, he's still on. With, I did read somewhere where there was a little bit frowning upon doing approaches now because of short staff, in some of the, air traffic control facilities. And I certainly don't want to pressure the system, but is that a factor?
No, just like any time, if we're too busy to work a practice approach, we'll say so. But if you filed IFR, that's one of those services that we can't really deny. I might put you in a holding pattern until I can safely work you and provide the service that you need. But Another thing coming out of Manassas, if you file IFR, something you might not think about is the added safety of, I'm going to climb you to at least, well, a lot of us go to 4,000, even though you're doing practice approaches around the area, and they normally start lower than that. So you're getting up higher, you're getting into the Bravo, you're getting out of that VFR corridor with every single person coming in and out of the tracks at the same altitudes. It's a little bit safer for you as well. But as far as the practice approaches, because of our staffing, I'm of the opposite opinion. Right now, I have plenty of time to give practice approaches. I'm not doing anything else. So I wouldn't worry about that. If you're trying to do something, if you're trying to accomplish the task or do approaches, file it, ask for it. We're going to tell you if we can't do it. And most controllers probably aren't going to deny it. So.
Okay, that's good to know. Appreciate that.
Hey, Gabe, could I ask one follow-up question while he's still on here about that? Obviously, around here, we're having to file with the SFRA, either that or we'll file IFR to get the practice approaches. Let's say we're not around here. Let's say we're back in St. Louis, and somebody wants to just shoot a practice approach. What's the A, is there any regulatory statute, or B, is there any prohibition against just shooting a practice approach out on your own with a safety pilot without a discrete code, without talking to the controlling agency? Is that kind of viewed as faux pas? If I just want to, vector myself onto an ILS or pick up a GPS approach, but I'm on a 1200 squawk and I'm certainly nowhere near an SFRA. I'm out in the middle of nowhere.
No, and it happens all the time around here too. At Hagerstown and Martinsburg, we've changed our policy a little bit. It used to be, and you may or may not have noticed, it used to be that the tower would work some VFR guys doing practice approaches, and then we're working guys doing practice approaches, or we're running IFR traffic on the same approach, not knowing that the tower is talking to the other guy. There were some conflicts there. So now our agreement with those two towers is if you call them up for VFR practice approaches, they're going to put you on us, so that because we're the ones setting up all the other traffic on that approach. The towers don't own that airspace. So we can either work you into the sequence appropriately, which is safer for everybody, or we at least know you're there and can slow the IFR guy or turn him. We can still sequence for you. But as far as doing it VFR, there's nothing against that. Happens all the time at Winchester. Happens all the time at Leesburg. You're on your 1226 doing your own practice approach, and we're running IFR guys in there. We see you, we adjust for you as best we can. I have held an IFR aircraft before at still because there was just too many VFR guys practicing on the arrival. They don't like it, and they usually tell me we'll cancel and go in, but that is the safest move for me. I can't in all consciousness allow him to continue that approach when there's a conflict there with known traffic, even though legally I can clear him for the approach and it's up to you guys to sort it out. It's not the right way to handle things. But no, there's nothing preventing you from doing it VFR on your own. A lot of the helicopter guys, they'll call up and they'll want us to do services for them, but they don't want to climb to the minimum altitudes. Well, I can't give you services below those altitudes, so they do it on their own anyways, even though we're talking to them. So.
Okay, yeah, that's super helpful. I've just seen a lot of guys, even during my training, try to, they'll duck down to 2800 direct still and then shoot the practice ILS into Leesburg on VFR. And I just didn't know if that's out there pissing you guys off. That's they're trying to get IFR traffic into Leesburg.
No, well, I'm not going to say, it doesn't piss me off. I'm going to speak for myself. I don't know what other controllers think about it, but personally, there's a lot of you guys that do practice approaches at Leesburg, and I don't necessarily want to talk to all of you because then I definitely will be too busy. But I know you're out there. I know what you're doing. We depict the arrivals on our scope, and if you're on a VFR code and you're tracking from Corny to Cactus on an approach, I know what you're doing and I know how to adjust for it. I don't necessarily need to talk to you VFR to do that. Or really do I want to?
All right, that's
You're
awesome.
You're in a Skyhawk and I'm vectoring a Gulfstream in. There's nothing I can do to keep him behind you
I'm going to give him a turn. I'm going to give me enough space so I can just clear him and let him go. Or I'm going to say, hey, can you accept the visual approach? And I'm going to cut him in short off of the arrival or off of the approach so he's not in your way and clear him ahead of you. But I hope that answered you. I don't know if I.
Yeah, that did. That was awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
So does anybody have any other last minute questions here that you want to toss out, or thoughts, concerns? Mike, you got anything?
Hey, Gabe. So,
yeah,
so I
Chris?
think Gary asked a question, right? That Gary, what do you say? You were out of currency on your IFR rating for a number of years, and how do you get current again?
Oh yeah, Tim answered it in the chat before he left.
Okay.
I didn't realize it was actually. I didn't realize it was that easy to get back, but
okay.
He said the few things I had to do. I said it's probably going to be more than that because I'm rusty.
So that means you just got to come fly with all of us.
Yeah.
With all the stuff that you've, with all the value you've provided for us, man, let's go flying, and we got to get you back in the airplane. So thank you for everything tonight, Gary.
Yeah.
This was a fun one. Airspace is always interesting. It's kind of cool because, we start off in sort of a directed fashion and then sort of end and kind of get somewhere else, and other questions come up. So hopefully you guys are good with that, but I feel like it flowed pretty well tonight. Before I kind of close out here, I have a few last minute remarks, but does anybody have anything you want to add? Chris, thank you for that. Mike, do you have anything? You good?
I'm good.
Okay. Bob, you're good? Bob Garrity?
Hey, Gary.
And
definitely, yeah. Thanks, Gabe. That was another good meeting.
Cool.
Hey, Gary.
Go ahead.
Hey, quick question for you. I've been flying in and out of Detroit the last week or so, and every flight out, departure controller has been asking how many passengers we've got. Are you guys doing the same thing?
I did last week. I haven't done it in a while. Even last week, we were getting 3, 4, 5 passengers. I honestly don't know how the airlines are doing.
I was just curious as to whether that was something that they're collecting data on, or whether it was just curiosity. That's all.
Hold on one second. I got I'm gonna try and share this thing if I can figure out how to do it on here, but yeah, we're tracking it. I can't find it on my phone here. I could have done it on the laptop, but we're down to about, at Dulles, we were at 340 or 60 operations today or yesterday. That time last year, we were at 900 and some.
Yeah.
Baltimore, National, they're all the same. So we're down, we're down to 30% of our traffic.
I had 5 legs 3 days ago, and I had 37 passengers total.
Total.
Yeah,
Total.
I don't know how they.
Total in
how
one
y'all
day.
are making money. I'm supposed to fly to Texas in a couple of weeks, and I don't think that's probably going to happen. So.
Hey, did you guys see that article that I think Caitlin posted online about Ryanair flying all their planes without people on them? I skimmed it. Did anybody see that?
Yeah.
What?
I think they're trying to keep the planes flying so they won't have to pickle them up and pay on maintenance and all that.
It's to keep gates. It's a regulatory thing in Europe.
But it's the same here too, I believe. If they're scheduled carriers, if they want to keep those routes and the gates and things, they have to continue to meet their schedule.
Yep.
Okay.
I don't know if they've gotten any relief from the regulations, but they had to have gotten some because they've canceled a whole lot of flights. So
interesting.
But well, Gary, I'll go out and fly a plane. I'll fly a Cessna to give you something to do. Some crazy guy last night cleared me to the class Bravo, altitude my discretion. That's unheard of. Never heard of such a thing.
Well, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to make you descend.
That are on demand.
It didn't make a whole lot of sense to make you descend into all that turbulence. So
yeah, that was fun, John. We were following you last night, so that was cool. Welcome back, and I'm glad you made it safely.
Yeah, the flight home was what was easy.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, it was great to see everybody again. I have 3 items that I'm going to figure out how to share with everyone. Number 1 is the video from Martin. So I think, Ryan, thank you for sharing that. The record link that Mike shared, which is how to look up your record. We'll put that somewhere, as whether it's Facebook or the website. And then the letter, I just checked my email. Mark sent me the letter for logging approaches, and I'll post that too. And so unless I've missed anything, those are the 3 items that I have that I'll share back with all of you. And then in the meantime, I don't know that we'll have another meeting this week. What we don't want to do is get burnt out on these meetings. And so maybe what we'll do is, recalibrate and see what other topics we can come up with that are solid, that we can have some very good content for, and, have one maybe the following week or even the week after. But I don't want anyone to get burnt out on these, but I feel like it's been incredibly fun for me to see everybody and also kind of go through this. So how does that sound to everybody as far as sort of that plan? Does that sound okay as far as frequency and all that? Good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a good plan.
Good deal.
Sounds like I'll finally be able to make one where I can have a beer.
Yeah.
You've done all these while I was at work.
Yeah. So thank you, Mike, as always. Thank you to everyone else, Bob, Greg, all of you that have provided guidance and insight here. I know that everybody really enjoys it, and thank you to everyone that tuned in on Facebook Live as well. So I hope everybody stays safe. Have a good night, and you'll see everything coming up on Facebook or the website soon.
Yep.
All right, guys.
Good night, everyone.
Have a good night. Be safe.
Take care, everybody.
See ya. Take care.